So there is something going on there. I mean, how you get from here to there is the question. So, well, it could be. We're not sure that that's not the case. A field drain could do that. A field tile might be coming through here. You can bang that down to this line and it just goes here. We also thought maybe, and we're not entirely sure about this, that perhaps there's some hydraulic pressure on this line and maybe kind of acting like a curtain drain maybe because it's the top line. This curtain drain's not picking up any of this stuff right here. So it may be acting as a curtain drain because it's shallower. And it might be just coming down into that trench right there. And then it's got enough hydraulic pressure, and we looked at the elevations. There's enough elevation there that it actually can work back through that multi-zone valve and down here. That could be happening. We're not entirely sure. By the way, that multi-zone valve, the way I understand it, is when it's up in the up position, I mean, it's wide open. You take water and you can go right through the thing from underneath through these pipes. I believe that is the case. If that thing's up,
I heard that thing just clicked on, so I keep slowing. But I don't.
Yeah, when it's off.
That's going in, but I don't know about going out.
If I think about it correctly, that high pipe that comes in, it's coming in and pushing that plunger down to the water pressure. When it's off, it comes back up. So all the water underneath, and there's how many pipes down, there's 4 pipes underneath, you can bring water in and right back out. So that could be happening. We're not entirely sure yet. But nonetheless, the die moving like it did told us the water's influencing the system, whether it be like this or whether it be a tile. We thought we saw something going on here. So we dug down 4 feet deep here, no tile. There's a lot of water moving down that soil, and we also know that there's a sandy layer in there, just the lens of it. A sandy lens of soil can also act like a tile because it just wants to migrate right through it. So that could be it. So we're still working on that system, but bottom line, I don't think it was a bad design or even a bad placement. Some of you know the soil scientists could have saw all this coming. It's just one of those things. Unfortunately, the homeowner's been somewhat easy to work with. The other thing that we noticed is this here. When they did their grading around the house, there's a hill back here, and water comes down this hill, and then they put a swale around the back. They directed all the water toward this end of the system. It is bad. When we were out there, it was raining. It was covered with water. The multi-zone valve box was taking water on. It was bad. So that certainly isn't helping. So right now, we feel like the builder probably should have addressed this curtain drain issue because they put it too deep, and then they should have addressed this swale. They just shouldn't be directing water toward the system. So we recommended the homeowner, as of right now, to improve this and improve that, see what happens. I hate to have guys sending people out there to do work, but I don't have all the answers. So they may have to try that, see what it does, and if it doesn't work, we may have to continue to look at addressing this water issue, however it's getting in there. So that's the first one that I want to make mention of. Second one, this property here is down on Parks, Paris Township. The reason I want to, we learned some lessons, I think the installer and we all learned lessons on this job. You can imagine you got a house about 350 foot back up the hill, up a huge hill. In fact, to get the elevations on this property, I had to move the transits 5 times so that I could get the elevation from the bottom of the lift tank to the box. It was huge. This hill was enormous. So that, from the very beginning, is a difficult system to know, to determine your head. So you've got to be very careful. So the first message is be very careful when you're trying to determine your head on a system like that. It turned out what happened was the total dynamic head was 75 feet. And I want to tell you 65 or so feet of that was the actual elevation. So we had about 65 foot of elevation, 10 or so feet in friction in the pipe. Force main was run 350 feet long. The design called for 57 foot of TDH and 250 foot of force main. Well, the installer dropped the pump from the original design in the tank, and guess what happened? Water didn't get there. Burned the pump up. Pump just sat and ran, and never got to the top. We pulled out the pump curves, and I think the maximum TDH that pump was capable of doing was like 63. So it's never going to get there. As an installer, I guess the next point to make here is, as an installer, you want to verify. Verify that everything you're doing is right, especially on a job. Some jobs are easy. A job like that, set that transit 5 times if you have to, and make sure all your elevations are right, because what happened was this system, months later is when we find all this out. If we address it from the beginning, we can say, was it a design flaw? Was it a installation error? Where did the error happen? So we can address it much earlier. The next thing we learned was the benchmark got destroyed. So when we're trying to work out, did the installer do something wrong? Did the designer do something wrong? Did they both do something wrong? Benchmark's gone. What am I supposed to do? I can't tell anymore. So as a designer, if you work on designs, the best as you're able, I would set as best as possible a permanent or a semi-permanent benchmark so it can be relocated in the future. It was a stake and they leveled it. So the stake was gone to be able to take a benchmark elevation. So we want to do the best we can to set permanent benchmarks so that we can find them in the future. And the last thing, the last point of all this was, I can't account for how it happened, but the as-built plan showed 40 feet of TDH. Somebody either didn't do their math right or didn't take the time to do it right. And the as-built that came in didn't even recognize that there was going to be an issue. Until months later, and the homeowner says, man, my pump's all burned up, the water's filling up, what's going on? Well, even if he hadn't taken the time to verify it when he installed it, he should have verified it when he did the as-built plan. And it would still have been caught early in the process. So those are the exception because there are so much elevation, so much difference there, but just keep those things in mind.
Okay, I have focused and I apologize for the miscommunication, on the geology of Stark County, which controls the soils in the area. I'm sure you guys have always wondered, how did that get there? So, this is soils map of Stark County. The county itself is on the Allegheny Plateau, and it's on the shoulder called or on the Allegheny Plateau is the shoulder of the Appalachian Plateau, which is the upland to our east. That area, at the time of the Pennsylvanian, which is the soils that are in the area, was in uplift. There was a collision going on between continents. The Appalachians were being uplifted by the African continent colliding and coming together and closing up an ocean. So the sediments that were eroded off that area are part of the sediments you're seeing here in Stark County. Now Stark, because of the glaciers at a later date after the Pennsylvanian, the soils in the area are controlled by that glaciation. You're seeing here a change in the soil, and in this area here, those are areas that were not glaciated. And that's the boundary in the southern part of the county where the glaciers actually stopped. Check this here. The bedrock geology in the area is of Pennsylvanian age. Those rocks that make up that are 325 to 286 million years old. It's pretty old. They consist of interbedded sandstones, siltstones, coals, clays, shells, and limestones. And geologists give them names. So the Pottsville and the Allegheny group and the Tanama group. Those are names that mean nothing to you, but as a geologist, they mean something to me. To a well driller, they would mean something to them because those are our aquifers in the area. During the time period of the Pennsylvania area, here we have the mountain ranges that were being formed by the collision of the continents. And at the time, the mass of the North American was not all here. But they put the outline in so you kind of get an idea where we all fit in the geography. In the Great Lakes region, there was a basin, a low basin. It was an inland sea, and the sediments that swept off and eroded from those mountains to the east were deposited in that area. You start with near shore, you would have sand and gravel deposits that would be the sandstones. Further away from the shore, because you have grading of the sediments, you would get silt, and siltstone would be the stone that those sediments would form. Further on out, you would get deep water shales, and those are clay materials. So when you guys are digging in the clay, you can blame those deep water shales for that material being there and the glaciers. Intermittent to those sediments and paralleling that shoreline were high areas, and you get some limestones in the area that were formed from like coral reefs, similar to what you would see, say, in the Bahamas. Now the area would be very similar if you were going to think about the Mississippi Delta and the coastal plains of southern United States and the Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi coast. That's what you would be looking at as far as environment goes of the deposition of those materials. This is after that time period. There was a large break in deposition of materials in the area. There wasn't any rock or sediment being deposited. From 248 to about 16 million years ago, Ohio did not see any kind of deposition of material in the area. What we saw was the flow of water was to the northeast. This drainage pattern here is a drainage pattern called a Taze. This is a drainage pattern for the Ohio River, and at that time these drainage patterns were to the northeast. Now with the glaciation, and there were 4 of them here in the in the North American continent, the drainage patterns were changed. And then so your control of your soil types that are in the area were also changed. This is the drainage pattern pre-glaciation of the Stark County area. You notice this is called the Ravenna River, the Dover River. These all flow north. In the Canton area, this I believe is like the Sherritt Creek area. These drainages flowed to the north, up to the Taze, and then up into the area where the Erie Basin is, and then up into the Canadian area. The 4 ice ages in North American continent were the Kansan, the Illinoisan, the Wisconsin, and I've missed one, Nebraskan. The Nebraskan and the Kansan glaciers did not affect Ohio. Mostly Wisconsin and Illinoisan, and there is a little bit of pre-Illinoisan on the western side of the state. But what happens when you have a glacier is you get an accumulation of a large sheet of ice. In this case, it's called a continental glacier. It's a little bit different than a valley glacier, in that you get a spot started, say here up in Quebec, which is where the glaciers in this area originated, and you get a mile thickness of ice. If you think about a mass that size, it's moving under its own weight. It's pushing like a bulldozer on the front end of that. All this material that's underneath that gets picked up, tumbled into that ice, and pushed into the area.